Welcome to Stand Up for Doctors. I'm your host, Kim Downey. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'd like to welcome Dr. Matt Daniel. Thanks for joining us today, Matt.
Hi, Kim. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. And also, thank you very much for all the work that you do supporting clinicians. So, thank you very much.
Oh, well, you're very welcome. I'm happy and proud to do it, and I feel blessed to be doing this work. So I actually like to start by sharing how I met each of my guests, and I reached out to you on LinkedIn last June upon realizing that we shared a number of mutual connections. And then in August, I invited you to participate in one of the group of Kevin MD articles I collaborated on with a dozen physicians, and you graciously accepted my invitation. And our piece, Reigniting After Burnout, Three Physician Stories, also features Dr. Susan McClellan-Tolbert and Dr. Michael Hirsch, and that was published in October. And then you graciously asked me to be a guest on your podcast, Doctors at Work, and I felt incredibly honored. So thank you for that invitation.
That seems like a long time ago now, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And it was just, I think, like October or November or something, right? And now that I have my own show, which is crazy because when we did that, I did not have my own show. And actually, my husband told me to stop saying it's crazy and to start saying it's unexpected for all the things that have been happening. So I have to try to change that. So that's why I corrected myself. And now that I have, my own show, I am just thrilled to be able to reciprocate. And by way of introduction, Matt is an ENT surgeon and coach who specializes in coaching for doctors and coaching for teams working in healthcare. And Matt says he's passionate about making a difference in the lives of others in the wider society. And I love that. I am too. And today we'll be talking about some of Matt's top tips for his physician colleagues from our collaborative article. And they include number one, your ideal career may not exist yet. You must create it. Number two, define your life and career's core purpose and embrace the inevitable compromises. And number three, know your value. So what would you most like our audience to know about you as we begin our conversation?
Probably that I never used to have any of those three things, and that's probably normal. That I think that all of us, if I think how I ended up in healthcare, I would imagine it's the same for everybody else. Whether that's doctors or nurses, occupational therapists, speech therapists, anybody else. I think you go down the route of healthcare because you want to make a difference and you like people, and you want to make others better, and that's fantastic and that's admirable. And then you go through a period of training, and during that training, you gradually notice that what's rewarded is the ability to tick boxes, pass exams, move from one stage to the next. The creativity and that willingness and that interest in really deep and meaningful connections disappears, and then you find yourself working in a system that is permanently stressed, permanently in a crisis, and often understaffed, and that kind of makes it challenging. So that's maybe a little bit of background, but the flip side of that is that much as there are lots of very unhappy doctors out there, many of them on Twitter. But I would also say that probably for every one person that is loudly unhappy, there are probably another 8 or 9 people that quietly have quite a decent career, that enjoy what they do, they have good connections with patients, and those people, by and large, are not loud on Twitter. Nobody goes on Twitter and social media sort of saying, oh, do you know what? I have quite a nice job, and I have quite nice patients, and I have colleagues that I quite like. And that you just don't hear that. So what you hear is the negative tirade and the people that are struggling. And of course, yes, there is a lot of that, and I'm not suggesting that people have a perfect career, but I think there does need to be a bit of a reality check. I think, or it feels to me, there needs to be a reality check of where we are at the moment, because the general perception is that it's all miserable and that everybody's unhappy and that there's no way out. And I simply don't think that's the case. I think there are lots of people that have rich and meaningful careers, and there are certainly ways that you can create that. And that might be by changing yourself, or it might be by changing your environment, but it's something that is eminently possible to do.
I think that is such a good point, and you're right. And by writing that series of articles we did this summer for Kevin MD, that's what I was trying to spotlight, because I knew a lot of doctors are struggling, but then on LinkedIn I saw a lot of doctors that were thriving, and managing to do well even with all the obstacles in the system today. And that's what I tried to do, is I picked a dozen of you to kind of spotlight what you were doing, to share that and give other physicians, hope and ideas to move forward. So thank you for participating. I love everything you're saying, and I think you're right. And I had just dropped an episode earlier this week with Dr. David Alfrey. He's a retired anesthesiologist in Nashville, and he says he feels like he was the luckiest guy in the world. And he had a great job, and what he got to do was take care of patients. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Let's see. So if we want to start with your first tip there, your ideal career may not exist yet. You must create it. Would you like to speak some to that?
So I think what that means to me is that when I went into healthcare, so I'm 50, so it's decades since I first started. The what I expected, the careers that existed 30 years ago, they don't exist anymore. And yes, sort of I'm an ear, nose and throat surgeon, and yes, we still take tonsils out and we still do tracheostomies, but how we do it, the kind of patients that we treat, the context that we work in, it's completely changed. Yeah. And it'll continue to change, and some of it for good and some of it for bad. Yeah. Or some of it for indifferent, but things will continue to change. So you enter a career, and it makes it difficult, because the reality is that if you think in 10 years it'll be X or Y, the reality is that none of us really know what things are going to be like in 10 or 12 years or 20 years. So if you make a starting point in your career and you are really focused on what I'm going to have in 10 years time or 20 years time, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Because the reality is that in 10 years from now, things will be different again. So that's one aspect of it, which is around people's expectations, that people need to realize that things are changing all the time. And it's less about being focused on what I'm going to have in 10 years time. And it's much more important to think, how am I enjoying today? Yeah, how am I not how am I going to enjoy in 10 years time? How am I enjoying today? But combined with investing in yourself, in thinking, how can I develop myself so that in 10 years time, come whatever, I'm going to be positioned in a way where my skills are going to be needed and I'm going to be able to thrive. So that's kind of one aspect of it. The other thing also is that for me is I'm a big advocate of portfolio careers. And what I mean by that is I mean people that concurrently have a number of different roles. And the reason why I think that's so powerful is that when it comes to trying to create a meaningful career, chances are that each one of us will have multiple things we're going to want in life, and there isn't one career that ticks all of those boxes. Yeah. So certainly in my life, there isn't one career that ticks all the boxes for what I want from my life. So what I've done for myself is I have multiple careers, and each one of those careers ticks a different box. Yeah. So between my portfolio of careers, all of the boxes that I want ticking, everything that I want in my work is met. But there's not one career that meets it. Multiple different careers meet different bits of what I want. The other sort of thing that's also really useful with portfolio careers is that I think going from one place to another, and being a little bit of an outsider in everything that you do, I think that stops you getting consumed with being on the inside. It gives you a perspective, yeah. So if I think maybe in my career when I first started, and I largely had largely a clinical career, within one large organization, and and whether you like it or not, you get absorbed into that. You know everything, you remember everything, you know everybody, every problem you've seen several iterations of. And actually, I don't think that's a particularly helpful position. Yeah, in one way it's good because you have that institutional memory, and that's fine. But also it means that you get blinkered because you think, well, this is the only way there is. I only know this job in this organization, and you lose perspective. That actually, maybe where you are, it might be quite good actually compared to other places, or at least some aspects of where you are might be quite good compared to somewhere else.
Mhm.
And if you do move between different places, that cross pollinates your ideas. It means
Mm.
you can bring different perspectives from one organization or from one job to the other job, and that's very powerful. And it stops you getting buried and absorbed into one single place with complete lack of connection to the reality of a world out there. Yeah. So I think that's kind of why for me, it's that idea of investing in yourself so that whatever happens, you'll be well
Right.
positioned to thrive, but also having multiple different careers. And if I kind of give examples from my life, for example, what I do a lot of education, and I started off doing postgraduate education, and it turned out that it wasn't for me.
Mm.
So I gave that up, and I moved into undergraduate education, and I'm absolutely loving that aspect. And then the curriculum then changed, so I then was involved in rewriting all of that, and then that meant that I
Oh,
recreated all the materials, I wrote new presentations, and I love doing that. Recorded video, so it was really really creative, and I love doing that. And then we had to change how teaching, and then I've ended up teaching. So the role that I do in undergraduate education, at the moment, that role didn't exist 10 years ago. Yeah, it's
right.
it's
Wow.
it's a role that's evolved, and I thought, okay, what do undergraduates need?
Right.
And then I aligned my career to meet that need. Yeah. And likewise, if I think of kind of my career development coaching side, again, I'm doing sort of some stuff internally that's career development related. There's some stuff that I'm doing with training organizations, like medical training organizations, or some voluntary organizations. And again, those kind of things, they didn't exist. There wasn't what I'm
Right.
doing. There wasn't a job plan. And I guess you might say, okay, how have I achieved that? Is I've achieved that by investing in me.
Mm-hmm.
So I've invested in myself, in my development. I've identified something that gives my life meaning, which for me is developing others or helping others. But I've started off by really upskilling myself, developing myself. Getting experience, getting knowledge, getting qualifications, and that means that when it comes to some of those additional roles, I'm now quite attractive for anybody who wants somebody in that
Right.
position, number one. And number two, I'm very confident and very capable of delivering something to a really high standard. But that has started with me knowing what is it that I want, which vague direction. I didn't know which jobs there were. I knew there was a direction I wanted to go into. The jobs
Right.
didn't exist, yeah, but there was a direction which for me was around, developing others or career development. That's the direction that I wanted. And then I upskilled myself, I trained myself in those areas, and then opportunities came, and I took them and created them and molded them, in a way that I can make a difference, in that field. But those jobs that didn't exist before I
Right.
did it or created it. Yeah. And as
Right.
it happens, I've got a skill that I want to use. There's a need out there, and it's a perfect match.
Right. Wow. So some doctors that are struggling, they might be like burnt out or exhausted and they might think, wow, all that sounds great, but how do you have time to do that? I know like some doctors, and again, I think of like, primary care doctors or the doctors who don't sit in front of you with the EMR record, but then they take their notes home and they're doing the notes at 9, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. And then also there's certain specialties that are getting lab results constantly, and they're looking at the lab results, or, at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And then they finally go to sleep, and then they get awoken for somebody's potassium is off, right? And, the nurses or whoever's, paging them doesn't realize that that wasn't urgent. And then they just get up early in the morning to get a head start, and they do it all over again. Do you have any advice? Because I bet that there's many physicians who feel like that and think, how could you do all of those things? Plus, you haven't shared. I think you got a master's in coaching, right? A master's degree. So all this stuff you're talking about, how did you actually do it, or what would you say to those doctors?
So I probably start by saying by quite blunt, and I would say, well, that's a choice they're making. Yeah, and it's a choice that I did not make. Yeah, so having the computer on at 10 o'clock at night, that's a choice. Having your phone on at 10 o'clock at night, that's a choice. Wanting to earn lots of money, that's a choice. Yeah, and I guess sort of maybe for me is I don't particularly earn a lot of money in my clinical practice. I mean, I think in UK. We don't earn as much money in UK. There's a strike on at the moment, precisely related to that. But I could have said, I'm going to do private practice and I'm going to work weekends and all of that. And it's a choice that I've made not to. So a very sort of simple thing would be, I've made the choice that being as wealthy as I can be, that wasn't important to me.
Mm-hmm.
But these kind of things are important to me. So if there are people listening and finances are important, or they've got families, they would need to pay for children's education, I mean, that's fine also, isn't it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But what then needs to happen is that there needs to be an understanding that I'm doing this Saturdays, I'm doing this at 9 o'clock at night in the service of supporting my
Mm-hmm.
family. And actually that's a really powerful position to be in. Yeah, so that I might sort of say I'm not particularly wealthy, but that's because I've done that in the service of developing myself and in the service of doing X, Y, and Z, because that is what matters to me as an individual. And somebody else will say that what matters to me is having the money to support my family, and that's perfectly fine also. But then there needs to be an understanding that, yes, I am doing this at 9 o'clock at night, in the service of being able to support my family or being able to pay for X, Y, and Z. And the powerful position there for me would be around acceptance. Yeah, that if that's what people are doing, they're doing that in the service of X. Okay, so and I think if I kind of move maybe a little bit away from money and finances, the other thing then also is the boundaries around people's
Right.
clinical works that people have put in, and again, sort of some of that depends on how you work. And if I think, for me, my clinical practice is pediatric airway. And the reality of that is, and there are two of us at the moment. For a long period of time, I was a single-handed practitioner, and in a busy department, and I often sort of got called out of hours, and that for me was fine, yeah, because I didn't see that as something that would drain, because if somebody phoned me at 10 o'clock at night, to go in and sort of and deal with a really complex airway, that didn't bother me, because I was going in making a difference.
Right.
Yes, of course it was annoying if I had to do
Right.
something. Yeah,
Mm.
but I didn't. I saw, okay, I have the skills. People need my skills. I'm going to go in,
Right.
and I'm going to do that. Yeah, so that I didn't mind. Yeah, but equally, if I think for results, I have set times myself during which I do results, and and there's a pathway, and that there's a pathway as to how any communication ends up, and and again, for me, the way the things work is, I do my admin typically 7:30 till 8 o'clock in the morning, and then the rest of the time I don't do admin for the rest of the day. And typically, I might do that, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or whatever the days are, and that's when I check my admin emails, and that's when it's all done. And even though I might check my emails the rest of the time, if there's anything needs to be related, I put a flag onto it, and I know that that's my 7:30 sort of
Okay.
in the morning, and that's kind of when I do my admin. I have an amazing personal assistant who is brilliant,
Mm,
and and over a number of years, sort of, between the two of us, we have figured out how we work together. So it's not that, sort of, it's sort of, we joke that, some doctors she refers to as princesses. I don't think that's me, but sort
okay.
of, sort of, some of us are really high maintenance. Hopefully that's not me, or
Uh-huh.
maybe.
I don't think so.
But hopefully, what I do is we figured out a way that something that works for her, and that it works for me. And and she packages sort of anything that needs any actions, information, correspondence. She packages all of that up for me, and then I do it at a time, which is my admin time, and then
Okay.
I do that. So that's kind of ways of working. Of course, if you're on call, then that's different, isn't it? But I don't think that we're discussing on calls here.
Right, right,
We're talking
right.
about people checking, their emails and the results, on an evening when they're not on call. And for me, that's boundaries. But maybe also colleagues, sort of, if you're a department of 10. Sorry, that's my dog barking.
Oh,
If you're a department of 10, and and each one of you is dealing with urgent results at 10 o'clock at night, well, maybe there's a question there: do you need to work differently as a department? Yeah. Because
uh-huh.
one person's on call, when you're on call, you cover for the rest of your colleagues, and then you have the next nine evenings off. Yeah. So there's ways of working, and for me, they're all choices that people make. And in terms of, on call, it's often people are their own worst enemies, because people think I'm indispensable, therefore it has to be me. It's my ego. I'm the only person that's capable of doing that. And yeah, if that's how you think, if you think it's your ego, you're the only person capable of checking somebody's sodium, then yeah, the price you're going to pay is you're going to be checking people's sodium
Right,
for
right.
eternity. But really, I mean, I doubt that you're the only person that's capable of dealing with somebody's sodium. Yeah, you might be the only person capable of doing an interventional radiology thing, maybe, sort
Right.
of, for a pediatric airway, or some very complex things. Yes, but those kind of things, you don't. That's not something that happens every single night. Yeah. So for me, I think that they're choices that people make, and I'm not saying it's easy, by the way. Yeah.
Right.
And it's much easier when it's much easier when you're 50, like myself, to talk about that. If you're early on in your career, or a trainee doctor, you perhaps don't have those choices. Certainly trainee doctors, I don't think, have those kind of choices. Yeah. So as a trainee doctor, I think you've got to accept that there's a way of being, and you're there to learn, and you're there to gain your experience. But when you become a sort of an independent practitioner, then at that stage, you do have choices. But it's also balancing, how much you want to work versus how much you don't. Are you going to be part as a team? You're going to be sole practitioner? Are you going to be happy to give your work away, or you're going to have a big ego that thinks I'm the only one that's capable of that? Do you want to earn lots of money, or do you want to earn a little bit less, but then do other stuff which may be family related? Yeah. And they're all balances that people need to make. Yeah. And for everybody that looks different.
Right. Well, everything you said is fantastic, and I can't wait for people to listen to this episode. And to recap just a few things that really stood out that I was thinking as you were talking is what are the facts and what are the stories we tell ourselves, and that's how coaching can help, right? Because
Yeah.
when you're talking about setting boundaries, and sometimes it's our people's perceptions of what has to happen or what only they could do and things like that. So a good coach can help you figure out, well, what are really the facts and what are the stories you're telling yourself? And
Yeah.
the other thing is setting boundaries, and that we all have more control than we think we do. And that is another critical point. And another critical point you made is about defining success, and what is success to you. And in the end, of your life, like, where, was it worth, like trading dollars for, free time. And again, it might go back to, again, what are the stories and what are the facts? You might felt that you had to put in the time, but maybe maybe there are things that you could do a little differently. So just to be able to think outside the box, and to have a conversation with somebody if you are having struggling, or not being able to figure it out on your own.
Mhm.
So, well, this is great. And let's see. So I think you've already spoken to defining your life and career's core purpose and embracing the inevitable compromises. Was there anything you wanted to add to that point?
No, I mean, I think that excuse me, that neatly went from that initial question, didn't it? That, for each one of us, success, meaning, purpose, that's very individual. There's no right or wrong answer.
Right.
Everybody has to define that for themselves. But, inevitably, there's going to be compromises because, if you go down one avenue, there's going to be another avenue that you're not going down, or another door is going to close. And, and that's fine, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah, okay. And then the third one, you could speak probably a little more to know your value.
yeah. So, I mean, what I mean by that is that there's a rather strange paradox that healthcare has, which is that on one hand, there's a global shortage of healthcare professionals. Yeah, not just doctors. Everybody, isn't there? Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
global shortage of healthcare professionals, and yet those of us that are in healthcare are stressed, burnt out,
Mhm.
undervalued and underpaid. And at the moment, we're in the middle of a doctor strike in the UK, and at the same time, we've got this thing that we can't pay. We haven't got the money to pay the doctors, but equally, um, when they're not there, then everything then falls apart. And you kind of think,
Mhm.
well, hold on a second. I mean, you can't have it both ways. You can't say the doctors are essential because it falls apart without them, and or nurses or whoever. You can't say that these people are essential. Sort of that NHS doesn't function without it. But at the same time, sort of saying, we're not willing to pay people more money. And the reality, again, with the strikes, it's something that's topical at the moment, at least in UK, is that irrespective of how much politicians or the public think that healthcare professionals are worth, the reality is that the healthcare professionals think they're worth more, and they are
Mhm.
living in droves.
Right.
I know that even in the US, you get paid more, but even there, people are living in droves, aren't they?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So irrespective of what the government or the public think that somebody should be paid, the fact is that people are living in droves. Yeah. So when it comes to knowing your worth, is you've got this thing that you're an essential component. You're essential to the organization. It couldn't function without you. But at the same time, the organizations might not want to support you, they might not invest in you, and they might not want to treat you particularly well, depending of course on where you work. And they're just incompatible positions to me. Yeah.
Right.
So, if we're all disposable and interchangeable, and the world carries on without us just fine, then yeah,
Mhm.
you can treat us like dirt. You don't need to treat us well. You don't need to pay us, fine. That would be one position, fine. Yeah. Or if we are all in a shortage occupation, and we're essential, and there's a massive need for that, then the reality is that yes, you need to train this workforce, you need to develop, and you need to treat them well, and you need to pay them well. And that is another version. But at the moment, we've got a version that to me is incompatible. You cannot have a
Mhm.
shortage of a population, of a workforce that is essential, whilst at the same time not training, not developing, not supporting, not investing in that workforce. That's an incompatible position. So when it comes to kind of to people personal um, um, careers, and kind of that idea of knowing how much you're worth, I think it starts with having an accurate appraisal of what you bring to organization. Uh,
Mhm.
because clearly, if you are an early career doctor who needs a lot of training and who needs a
Mhm.
lot of supervision, then that's going to be very different to somebody who's 50, who is
Mhm.
a sole practitioner, who creates a lot of income and value for organization. Because, if you are early on, then, yes, you have an important role, but equally, people are investing in you. And you need to understand that, yeah, that, you're going to
Mhm.
go into the workplace, and you go into the workplace, your seniors, your colleagues are investing in you, they're training you, they're giving you learning opportunities. And that's important that you recognize that. Yeah, because if you go into the workplace thinking the world owes me something, well, that newsflash, that's just going to be a surprise. Yeah, because the reality is that if you are early on in your career, people are investing in you, people are training you, people are developing you,
Right.
and you recognize that you are an early career doctor, and people are investing in you. So that's important. And when you then go into the workplace, you need to recognize that actually I need to make sure that I look at this kind of opportunities. Yeah, the deal is,
Mhm.
I'm here. Yes, I'm going to do all of these jobs for you, but equally, I am doing that in exchange for training. So you need to make sure
Mm-hmm.
that you get those training opportunities, because the two go
Right.
hand in hand. Yeah, because if you're just doing dead end stuff and not getting any training, that's wrong. Yeah, the deal
Right.
is you're going to do some very sort of menial tasks in exchange for having some high quality training, and you need both. Yeah. So
Right.
maybe, as a more senior doctor, you need to recognize that actually, I have skills, I have expertise, I bring all of that into my organization, and as part of that, there needs to be that there's I'm contributing, and it's a relationship of equal. I am equal
Mm-hmm.
to my organization. I'm contributing my to organization, and I am on an equal level with the organization. And that translates, that equality, to me, that translates into an adult conversation about how we
Mm-hmm.
work. Okay, the problem is that I think a lot of doctors, they don't position themselves like that. Sort of, they think, I'm here, I'm turning up, nobody cares about me, and there's
Right.
this difficult thing which is the organization and system that has all the power. Yeah, and actually I think that comes from the doctors, not from the organization. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
we position ourselves here thinking, I'm just a lowly doctor, I haven't got any power, I can't make any changes. Yeah, most of that
Mm-hmm.
nonsense. Yeah, because all of us can make changes, but we position ourselves low thinking I can't make any changes, and we position the system, the organization, higher thinking, there's all of this organization that has this mysterious power that it's treating me badly. Yeah, but that
Mm-hmm.
sets a hierarchy. But that, I think, that does not come from organization. I think that comes from us going into the workplace. Yeah,
Right.
when it comes to discussion, that kind of sets up a parent-child discussion. Yeah, there's the
Mm-hmm.
organization, the parent, aren't they horrible? And the sort of, there's me, the child, they're treating me badly.
Right.
Yeah?
Right.
So if you change that into, I'm a professional, I have skills, I bring value to the organization, and the organization is my equal. They provide me with patients, they provide me with expertise, they pay my salary, but we are an equal. So that translates not into I'm better than you conversation, but that translates into a we are equals. And a conversation that starts with we are equal, that means that we have an adult discussion, and we negotiate, of course. What can you do, what can I do, let's come to an outcome. We're all here for the patients at the end of the day, whether you're the chief exec, a frontline doctor, the matron, the medical director, we're all here for the patients, aren't we? Yeah. So
Right.
if the starting point is we are equal, we have a common purpose, then that translates into a conversation which is, I bring value and you bring
Mm-hmm.
value, and together we bring value. Let's have that adult discussion. Whereas if
Right.
we position ourselves as I have no power, I can't do anything, there's this horrible system up there, then that sets up a hierarchy, and and straight away, instead of having an adult discussion, sort of we have a really unhelpful discussion. And part of the problem with this, we talk about there's the organization, the system, and you think, who is the organization? Who is the system? Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's you and I. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we say, the system's treating me badly, but like, who is the system? Like, that's you and I.
Right.
Or we sort of say, oh, I don't like my organization, but like, who is your organization? Well, that's you and I. Yeah.
Right.
So it's to try and separate yourself from this mythical system organization that's doing X, Y, and Z that I dislike. I mean, it's nonsense, because the system, that is us. Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
so it needs to be. It's not about me versus the system. It's I am the system.
Mm-hmm.
I am equivalent. We're all adults. We all want to make a difference to the patient. So let's
Right.
treat each other like adults. My worth is I am bringing in a really, really important thing to the organization, but you're also bringing really, really important things in. So let's start with conversation there. We are equally valuable. We're both here for the patients, and and sort of let's negotiate. Yeah, and and maybe. If you do find yourself sort of somewhere where people are pushing you down, then that's also the time to know your worth. Yeah, if you
Mm-hmm.
find yourself in a situation where other people are pushing you into down, yeah, not when you've positioned yourself inferior to others, but where other people are pushing you down, then it's also recognizing your worth, that, what, there's a shortage of doctors out there. and you can go anywhere that you want to go because everybody is desperate. Yeah. So
Mhm.
if you genuinely find yourself in that kind of relationship where people genuinely are pushing you down. Yeah. And by the way, in my experience, as I say, normally I think that comes from us positioning lower rather than anybody else from above trying to push it down. Yeah. But if you do genuinely find yourself as a senior doctor in a place where people are pushing you down, then, well, know your worth because everywhere else is
Right.
desperate. And go and negotiate with a different organization where you don't have that hierarchical relationship, and you say you and I are equal, both of us have skills, both of us are here for the same purpose, let's behave like adults, let's work together for the benefits of the patients. And there are organizations out there that do that, and even if there are not organizations out there that do that, then the only way it's going to change is if you and I change it. Yeah, there's no point in wishing there's going to be.
Right.
I mean, what miracle is going to happen that's going to transform healthcare? There's no miracle that's going to transform healthcare. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
you and I are going to transform healthcare. Yeah, so you
Exactly.
stop wishing and make it happen.
Exactly. So that is like a perfect way to end this, right? And the things that you just said is it's empowering to physicians to hear what you just said and to know your value and know your worth. And again, going back to what are the stories and what are the facts, right? If we tell ourselves the facts about the leaders or the system, but knowing that we have more power than we think we do. That's great. And also for doctors here in the US to realize, things that are, doctors in the UK are struggling, doctors in Australia are struggling, doctors in New Zealand are struggling, doctors in Canada are struggling, right? So it's something that we all have to work on together. Well, thank you. This has been a really wonderful discussion. I've been so happy to have you join me today. So how can listeners get in touch with you?
Sort of people can look up on my website, mattdaniel.net. I have a number of resources on there. Probably the podcast. There's a podcast called Doctors at Work, and I talk to a variety of different people, both medical and non-medical, and the focus really is on career-related tips. So it's all largely about how do you do X, Y, and Z. And actually, sort of feedback on the podcast would be really appreciated. And probably sort of I spend time on LinkedIn and on Twitter now X, so people can connect with me on those two as well. And it would be great to connect and hear other people's experiences also.
Okay, well, that sounds great. And thanks again for being my guest today, Matt. I'm so happy to have you. And in closing, to move the needle in healthcare, we all need to raise our voices and we all need to care about each other. We already know that doctors need to care about patients. Patients need to care about doctors too. So stand up, doctors, and let's stand up for doctors.